Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneider, joined as always my co-host Nick Filato, and it's the doldrums of the offseason right now. We're into the end of May and June, where we got a little bit of OTAs that we're going to talk about, that we've been talking about, and we may have some more next week coming. But, once that's through, we're on the break till training camps. We're thinking of different things to do. So one of the things we wanted to do was check in on where the Giants are at in regard to the NFC East. One thing that we've heard from countless general managers who have been through the ranks with the Giants and head coaches is we need to close the gap on our own division. We need to try to find a way to not only close that talent gap, but then, of course, close the win gap, because beating your division is the easiest path toward winning your division. As simplistic as that sounds, Nick, it's actually the truth, right? You go 4-2 or 5-1 in your division, you're in a really good position to win that division, both from a tiebreaker standpoint and just from an overall wins-loss standpoint. So today what we're going to do is look at and break down where the Giants rank in the NFC East from an offensive standpoint, position by position, using an article that Nick actually published for Big Blue View. You can find it at Big Blue View if you just search Nick's author page, Nick Filato's author page. But we're going to go over it, and we're going to go position by position, and then we're going to see if I disagree with Nick on any of his breakdowns. So First of all, Nick, why don't you explain the process and what you did and the point system and everything like that?
So I went through each team's position group, starting at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then I just grouped in the entire offensive line. Last year, I believe I did go interior offensive line. I might even did center, but regardless, I did the entire offensive line now, so it's a little bit less nuanced if you want to be honest here. But I basically gave 4 points to the number one at each position group. Say Eagles had the number one quarterback, or the Cowboys had the number one quarterback. They got 4 points. The number two ranked got 3 points. The third ranked got 2 points, and then the last ranked team got 1 point. And then I aggregated all of those together, added them up, and I gave them what they came. This is a very detailed and scientific way to analyze the teams in the NFC East, as all you can tell. So I hope you guys enjoy this little, very detailed exercise that we have for you.
Yeah, I know. I like doing these. It's fun just to see where they compare, and we can kind of see, where they close the gap and where they haven't, in regards to where we view this preseason, because everything changes once we get into the season. But from a projection standpoint, that's what we do. We use the facts, we use the data to try to project. Let's see where the Giants are at. So let's start with the quarterback position, Nick. I want to hear your NFC East breakdown of the quarterback position.
Yeah, so this one was hard. Now, the Giants weren't in consideration for number one. Neither were the Commanders. So it really came down to Jalen Hurts of the Eagles against Dak Prescott of the Cowboys. And I think you can make a realistic argument that Dak Prescott is the better thrower of the football and maybe the better overall quarterback to Jalen Hurts. But I ultimately did go with Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. And look, it's a little bit difficult to do this. I think Jalen Hurts and the Eagles, offensively, they're in a much better position than Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, or at least I would say a better position. Obviously, they still have CeeDee Lamb, the Cowboys, that is. But the Eagles, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, they have a sick 11 personnel package. Now they have Saquon Barkley on board to help out the passing game as well as the rushing attack. We know the rush is married to the pass, and running the football is just going to help Jalen Hurts, especially when you have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts who is so dynamic with his legs. And ultimately, that's the reason why I ended up going with the Philadelphia Eagles, is because Jalen Hurts is a true dual threat quarterback, and I still think he is ascending as a passer. He has ascended as a passer. I think he plateaued a little bit this past season, whereas Dak Prescott took a huge jump forward still in terms of statistics. At least a lot of that was due to CeeDee Lamb. But ultimately, I did go with Jalen Hurts, but I am very open to being contended on this one because it was a grappling match in my brain.
Well, I'll start there, and then I'll get into the 3-4 rankings of this quarterback position. This is a tough one for me, tougher than I think for most. I look at it like this.
I'll say this to you, Dan, and I hate to cut you off, bro.
Yeah, go for it.
For the quarterback position specifically, I did incorporate the contract into this ruling. And Dak Prescott's contract, when you look at it, and Jalen Hurts just got paid massive.
Contract is not great either.
No, I know, but it's kicked back so far, man. 5-year, $255 million for Jalen Hurts. Dak Prescott is set to make $55.5 million this year, and then $40 million next year when his deal is technically over. So, like, from a contractual standpoint, the Cowboys are not in a good position at the quarterback position. Whereas the Eagles have spread it out over so many years, and they're going to worry about it a little bit later when the cap keeps growing, because Howie Roseman knows how to finagle the cap. But so that's another reason why I went with Hurts.
I can understand that. I look at it like this right now. I Dak Prescott to me is a better thrower of the football than Jalen Hurts. He's a much better processor than Jalen Hurts. I think Dak Prescott's most underrated trait is his ability to process defenses post snap. But it just seems like there is something about Dak, and it's weird from an it factor standpoint where, playoffs come and he's just not at his best, or he's not playing his best football, and he's turning the ball over at bad times, really putting them in a bad position to win the football game when they need it most. And that hasn't exactly been the case with Jalen Hurts. His playoff run in 2023 or 2022, I should say, was really phenomenal. I thought Jalen Hurts. I thought his performance in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs was outstanding. Looking back at that game, some of the most big time throws that outpassed to Dallas Goedert and a few other just big time throws. Few he made against the Giants as well that season, and some of the NFC East teams. I haven't seen that from Dak yet in the playoffs. At the same time, I have my concerns about Jalen Hurts moving forward. I feel like last year, teams kind of applied what they applied to Daniel Jones and Justin Fields and those types of quarterbacks, which is, you know what? We're not going to give you the B gap anymore. We're going to rush you in a certain way that maybe it doesn't maximize our chance to get to the quarterback, but what it does is maximize our chance of beating this quarterback because we're not giving you those lanes to rush through. You now have to win from the pocket. You have to process the defense, you have to use the middle of the field as a thrower, or your other option is to roll to your right and cut off half the field, which I feel like screwed over Daniel Jones, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts to a massive extent last year. So I still kind of want to be proven that Jalen Hurts can get back to that level of 2022. I less so feel that way about Dak because I feel like Dak's body of work is pretty complete at this point from a standpoint of you can beat Dak by letting Dak beat himself. But other than that, he's going to beat you by processing post snap, getting rid of the football on time, and having solid arm talent. I don't think his arm talent is anything special either, though, to be honest. So I go back and forth on those two. I think I would lean toward Hurts at this point because there's more upside there, but it's not lost on me that Hurts is a much better situation. Now let's get to your.
If we look at just arm talent, I would say Prescott has better arm talent than Jalen Hurts.
Agreed. I think from an arm talent standpoint, a case could be made that Daniel Jones has better arm talent than
I don't think so.
Than Hurts, but it's close. I don't love Hurts' arm talent. I never really been a huge fan of it. But I agree that I'm trying to think. So I think Hurts is a better thrower on the run than Jones, and I think Hurts probably has more velocity to fit the tight windows than Jones. But deep throw wise, I think Jones might have him a little bit there. Just from I don't love Jalen Hurts' deep ball, but it's close there. Now let's get to the other two because Daniel Jones and Jaden Daniels, because Jaden Daniels might have a case for having maybe the best arm talent in the division, though I think that's also debatable from the deep ball standpoint.
Yeah, I would say it's still Dak Prescott. I have the Commanders quarterback room over the New York Giants quarterback room. I think it's close, but the contract really pushed the New York Giants down to only having 1 point, fourth in the division. I mean, you have Jaden Daniels selected second overall. You have him under contract for possibly 5 years if you're the Washington Commanders. I don't love his situation with Cliff Kingsbury as his offensive coordinator, but I do like a situation with a young Jahan Dotson, who I think is so much better than what we saw last year, and Terry McLaurin. Ben Sinnott at tight end, and I think they brought in Zach Ertz to be that savvy guy for him. Now, that's not too enticing, but overall, I think they have enough weapons, and Jaden Daniels is talented enough to where with that contract, you can build a really good infrastructure around Jaden Daniels, and you can run with it for the next several years to see how he actually is going to perform. Now, behind him, you have Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll, and then the kid from Notre Dame, Sam Hartman. And I don't think that's great. I like Drew Lock and Tommy DeVito over Marcus Mariota, Jeff Driscoll. But if you look at the quarterback position of the New York Giants with Daniel Jones, I've said this a couple times. Daniel Jones is a fine enough quarterback when he is on his rookie contract, but when he is making $40 million a year, it's going to hurt your team because I don't believe he is the type of quarterback to elevate a lot of the players around him. So that was really the deciding factor to going with the Commanders over the New York Giants. And Daniel Jones just also has such a bad big-time throw rate over the last several seasons. And if you just turn on the tape, there are opportunities where he could make big-time throws, specifically in 2022. Last year, hey, look, the deck was stacked against him. The offensive line did hurt him. I do think Tyrod Taylor played with a better offensive line. But at that same time, I don't know if it was as much of a disparity between the offensive line Tyrod Taylor played with and the offensive line Daniel Jones played with, relative to the big-time throws Tyrod Taylor made and the lack of big-time throws that Daniel Jones made.
Yeah, I'm going to bring up some of the great stats you had in this article. Unfortunately, that brought up a video, which I hope people didn't hear, but there are some bad video options on the Big Blue View site. Though I do like your site, and I do like the work that you do, Nick.
Thank
Just
you.
never a fan, and my site does this too. CBS Sports, these like pop-up videos. I know everybody hates them, but one thing you brought up, and I'll get into my thoughts on your last two rankings there, is Jones had a less, this is according to your article, Jones had a less than 2.5% big time throw rate in over the last 3 seasons. That's really bad. He's only thrown for more than 20 touchdowns once in his career. Tyrod Taylor, I didn't know this. Tyrod Taylor led the NFL in big time throw rate last year. 8.9%, just ahead of Matthew Stafford and Josh Allen. Wild stat, by the way. I mean, you can say all you want about how different their situations were, but how different were their situations? Was it 5 times difference in big time throw rate? That's the type of difference that they got from a supporting cast standpoint. That I'm very skeptical of. Jones ranked, according to your article, 39th out of 41 qualifiers, with 20% of their throws or more for a team. And you said the terrible situation Jones had early in the season is an excuse with merit, but the same reluctance to pull the trigger was on display in 2022 to a worse extent. Jones had a 2.4% big time throw rate in 2023, but only a 1.4% in 2022 in his first season with Brian Dable. So just an interesting stat there. Obviously, this is a stat that factors in with the Jaden Daniels discussion too, because Jaden Daniels, at least at the collegiate level, had a really big time throw rate, but only in his last season with Chip Kelly in the LSU offense. I remember going over that in our pre-draft, how he had like a 2 point something in some of those days with Arizona State, or was it Arizona State? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not so sure. I think you're right. It's probably closer than we think, just because we're not as high maybe on Daniels' floor. But I'll say this. I think it's undeniable outside of Giant circles, Nick, that one of these two quarterbacks, Jaden Daniels and Daniel Jones, has more upside than the other. Undeniable.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Giants fans will tell you the opposite, maybe some fans, but undeniable outside of Giant circle. All 31 other teams will tell you that one quarterback has considerable amount of upside more than the other. So I think it's fair you're ranking. Yeah, go ahead.
If we're not ruling in the contracts, there is a very good and strong argument for the Giants to be over Washington. I know there's a bit of an unknown with Jane Daniels, but the 1-2 punch of Drew Lock and Daniel Jones, you can make an argument that's better than the 1-2 punch of Jaden Daniels and Marcus Mariota, because at least there is a realistic path to where Drew Lock or Daniel Jones could be successful. Do I think that's going to happen? Not necessarily.
Right.
It's more realistic than Marcus Mariota ever being successful again in the NFL.
You ever feel sluggish or out of focus? Are you stressed? Has your digestive system caused discomfort or flatulence like a certain co-host on this podcast during a live stream? If so, you should check out AG1. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my daily health. I had more energy, I was better off at the gym, and I could focus on my work in a much more efficient manner. That's because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. Not only did I replace my multivitamin with AG1, but I love that every scoop also includes prebiotics, probiotics, and digestive enzymes for gut support. I recommend AG1 to all my family and friends because AG1 has a team of doctors and scientists that formulate around the latest science and maintains high quality standards within the industry. Even my friends have started drinking AG1, and they always tell me how energetic they feel and how it's helped them out at the gym, and also it's helped them manage their stress levels. That's why we're happy to have AG1 as our partner. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs when you first subscribe. Go to drinkag1.com/banter. That's drinkag1.com/banter to check it out. Our mental and physical well-being is of the utmost importance. Whether you're a world-class athlete or a podcaster like me, we all need to take that very seriously. That's why I'm excited that Unified Healing is sponsoring this episode of the Big Blue Banter podcast. Unified Healing is a new and super innovative global network of wellness centers powered by Energy Enhancement System, or EE System. If you haven't heard of the EE system yet, you'll want to listen up. This technology promotes wellness, deep relaxation, purification, and rejuvenation. Whether you're here in New York, New Jersey, Arizona, if you will, or hundreds of other locations across the globe, access to a center is easy and affordable. Interested in experiencing the EE system technology for yourself? Go to unifiedhealing.com/banter to learn more and find a center near you. That's UNIFYD healing.com/banter. No material or testimonials on the Unified Healing website are intended to be viewed as medical advice or a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified healthcare providers with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or treatment. And before undertaking a new healthcare regimen, include EE system.
Yeah, Daniels has done it before to an extent in 2022. We haven't seen Jaden Daniels do it just yet. So I'm fair if people want to go the two with the Giants there, one with the Washington, but I like how you did it because Washington clearly has more upside position. So that was 4 points for the Eagles, 3 points for the 3 points for the Cowboys, 2 for the Commanders, and 1 for the Giants at quarterback. Now let's get to running back and see your rankings there.
Yeah, 4 points goes right to the Philadelphia Eagles again. I absolutely hate it. There's going to be a lot of, it's going to sound like we're an Eagles podcast here. We're not at all. Absolutely despise
breaking
the Philadelphia
down
Eagles.
the brass facts.
Just breaking down the brass facts, and they have a lot of firepower on offense, and they made the big splash of signing Saquon Barkley to a 3-year, $37.75 million contract in the offseason. Howie Roseman, a general manager who typically does not allocate resources to linebacker and to running back, went out and paid big for the running back because they believe he is going to transcend this offense and really help out the 11 personnel package that was already damn good with DeAndre Swift. This is such an upgrade over DeAndre Swift. This was, if there could be more than 4 points, it would have went to the Eagles because the other 3 teams, I think the Commanders, who are my 3-point, and I'll go over that in a little bit after I get your opinion on this Eagles pick. They're not too far behind the Eagles, but the Cowboys and the Giants they're considerably behind these top 2 teams in the division.
Yeah, I think your rankings are pretty much spot on here. I was thinking if I was going to disagree at all, I'm a little higher on Austin Eckler than most right now. I know a lot of people are down on him. I feel like he was just playing hurt last year, but he is at that range where you fall off a cliff as a running back. So if somebody told me we're sitting here next year and Austin Eckler's not even non-existent at that point, like no one's even considering him. He's out of the NFL basically at that point, or like in the Dalvin Cook range of things right now where, Cook is looking for a job. That wouldn't surprise me either. I think it's fair to say the Eagles are the clear-cut best in the division with Saquon Barkley. In addition to, honestly, also Gainwell's not a bad player, and I really like Will Shipley. I thought he was a great running back. And I know you were ultimately the earliest, I thought, at least, on Brian Robinson Jr., and you nailed that one because I really like watching him play.
He's good, man.
I think I don't remember, it was so early in the season, but I broke down a game of his film for Beyond the Box Score, CBS Sports show we do. My God, was he good on tape, man. Like, he's just, like you said, when you evaluated him, like it's those little things, those nuances of playing the running back position that he does well, and that really stands out to me. So because of that, I want to put them to. My only debate would be Cowboys versus Giants. I think that's the one where I think I'm going to give the Giants the nod there.
And I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's our first disagreement. I'm going to go Giants 2, Cowboys 1. Look, Singletary, I think, offers more than Zeke at this point in his career, because if you look at the advanced numbers from Zeke, he was just terrible last year with New England. He might just be shot. And then it's like Dowdle. I'm going to take Tracy over the rest of the, rest of what any team has to offer there.
See, I disagree with you on that one. And the reason why I ranked the Cowboys over the Giants, the Cowboys come 2 points, Giants 1 point again, is because of Rico Dowdle. And I think Rico Dowdle is a better running back than he's given credit for. I think when we see Rico Dowdle's name, at least in like the fantasy community, we all just go like, Rico Dowdle, who's that? But like when you watched him play last year, I was under the impression, I was a Tony Pollard owner, right? I was like, yo, crap. I hope they don't give Rico Dowdle more carries because this guy's better than Tony Pollard. Like this dude is actually a pretty good football player and a pretty good running back. And I think the Zeke signing was just kind of like a cherry on top. I'm not looking at the Zeke signing and saying like, that's why the Cowboys are above the Giants. I think Singletary is better than both of those guys, but I think the 1-2 punch of Zeke and Rico Dowdle is better than the 1-2 punch of Singletary. And I'm not really 100% sure who is going to fill that void. Maybe Tyrone Tracy. And I do like Tyrone Tracy, but I think Dowdle is better than anything the Giants have secondary.
That's fair. I think that, but we disagree slightly on Dowdle, But and I'm part of that. It's tough to gauge because their offensive line is so much better than the Giants from a blocking standpoint.
Exactly.
But I can see that. I can see what you mean because he's got burst and he's got juice. So that's where we're at on that. Nick and I have a little bit of a disagreement there. I'm giving the Giants 2. Nick's giving the Giants 1 there. But let's move on to wide receiver. This is an interesting one as the Giants have really invested in this position lately.
Oh, yeah, baby. Okay. Eagles get the 4 points again. I absolutely hate it, but just got to call it what it is. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith is arguably the best 1-2 tandem in the NFL. I mean, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins rivals it. Obviously, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle just got paid recently. They rival that, but at least they're in the conversation. So I had to give Eagles number 1. I don't like the depth there, though. Paris Campbell made their 10 personnel package. Like, I was laying out the 10 personnel package. I think they had Devontae Parker. Devontae Parker was like, you know what? I don't really like cheesesteak. I'm retiring. Peace. And they also drafted Anaya Smith. Anaya Smith, he has some promise, some speed, right? But not a lot of depth. So I think it's closer between the Eagles, who have 4 points, and the team that I put at 3 points. I think it's actually closer than I would originally imagine. But the top 2 just made me give it to the Eagles over that team.
Yeah, I like your rankings. You have Eagles 4, Giants at second in division with 3 over the Cowboys, who have a proven stud in CeeDee Lamb, and then the Commanders 4. I think this is a great division from a receiver talent standpoint right now because even the Commanders all the way down at 4, like I can make a case that they're a strong team in the receiver position. McLaurin, I love his game. I think he's unbelievable on tape. He's been held back by quarterback play. Dotson is the one that's interesting because the advanced stats don't love Dotson, and I haven't watched a lot of his tape in the NFL, but I know we liked his tape coming out of college, but he has not apparently been good in the NFL. Then Luke McCaffrey was a sleeper I loved in this draft class. I think it's the big debate here. I think you nailed it with 4 and 1 here. The Eagles deserve the 4 points. The Commanders deserve the 1. The big debate is what you have at 2-3, Giants versus Cowboys there, because the Cowboys have the stud in Lamb, but after that, it's Brandon Cooks, Jalen Tolbert, and Turpin. The Giants have Malik Neighbors at the 1, but then they got Wan'Dale Robinson, Jalen Hyatt, Darius Slayton, maybe Isaiah Hodgins. You want to throw him in there as the 5, or if Slayton moves on, but I don't think Slayton is going to move on because he's at OTAs already. I love, like, we've watched the tape, Nick. We see what Wan'Dale does on tape. We see how often Jalen Hyatt is open on tape, and we see how often Darius Slayton is open on tape. It's not their fault that they haven't been able to rack up stats. You can blame who you want to blame for it, the coaching, the quarterback, or the O-line. I'm not here to debate that right now. It's pointless. But what I'm going to say is, regardless of who you're blaming for it, these guys have gotten open on film. It's obvious. We put the tape out here on our YouTube page. You can go back and watch. Just go to week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Go watch the Raiders game for all you want, and you'll see Jalen Hyatt open a million times. So it just comes down to me, like, can Neighbors get close to the level of CeeDee Lamb or just a little bit worse? And I think, honestly, I'm so high on his evaluation that he can, and it can happen right away. I really do believe that. That's how good of a receiver prospect we're talking about with Malik Neighbors. So I'm good with this. I'm going to give the Giants 3 here as well.
I like that, man. And that's kind of what it came down to. Lamb is over Neighbors right now. I don't think the gap is going to be that far apart after this season if we get a functional offensive line and functional quarterback play for Malik Neighbors. But I think even if we don't get that, it's going to be like Odell Beckham when the Giants sucked, where it's like, dude, you just got to get this guy the ball, right? Like, because he can do magic when you get him the football. I still think Brandon Cooks is a above average wide receiver, maybe teetering towards average, but the Cowboys being ranked 3rd isn't necessarily because of Brandon Cooks. It's more so Jalen Tolbert is their 3. And I love Kevontae Turpin. I think he's a good football player, more so as a special teamer and more so as somebody you just throw screens to, not necessarily a polished receiver. But if we look at the Giants' 10 personnel package, 4 wide receivers, Darius Slayton is their 4. Darius Slayton is so much better than Paris Campbell, Kevontae Turpin, Diami Brown. And that's not even considering the Isaiah Hodgins of the world. This could be like a homer pick because I cover the New York Giants and I watch the New York Giants a lot more. But I think personally, it's fair to have them 3rd or with 3 points 2nd in this division.
I think so as well. Tight end, what do you have there?
I had the Eagles number 1 again. I know it absolutely sucks. And I think the Cowboys could have had this. I think the Giants could have this. You could even make an argument for the Commanders, although I'm not quite there. The Eagles get number 1 because they have the best tight end in the league, and it's Dallas Goedert. And that's kind of where I'm at. Look, they have depth with Grant Calcaterra, Albert Okwuegbunam Jr., and CJ Uzama. I think CJ Uzama is a little bit long in the tooth at this point. Albert O didn't quite actualize the athletic ability that he displayed when in his early years with the Denver Broncos. And Calcaterra is kind of like a better receiving, less blocking version of Jack Stoll, who was on the Eagles last year and is now on the Giants this year. So I did not include Darren Waller in this debate. If Darren Waller was in this debate, it would easily be Darren Waller and the New York Giants with 4 points. But since Dallas Goedert, I think, is considerably better than anybody else in this division, I went with the Eagles.
It's interesting, Nick, because Goddard had such a weird year last year. I've already just seen just from doing our early fantasy mock drafts at CBS, like people are just sleeping on him. He's just going falling. And he did have such a weird year, and it's tough to imagine the production because of all the targets they have there, and now adding Barkley to the mix. But we're not basing it on like stats; we're basing it on the film. And Goddard gets open. Goddard is a really big target who has really smooth mover. And he's not a terrible blocker either. He's a solid blocker. So I think right now, looking at it, it's fair to give the Eagles the 4 here. After that is when it gets interesting. I think you can make a case, honestly, for any of the 3 teams for 3-2-1, besides maybe the Commanders, though Benson not. It could be argued if he does reach his, Sam Laporta-esque potential, he's going to be the best in the division. Not only, they won't be getting 3, they'll be getting 4 points at that point. But, Cowboys, Ferguson and Schoonmaker, I like both of them. I like Schoonmaker, Schoonmaker. I think it's Schoonmaker out of Michigan a lot. He didn't live up to the hype in year 1, but he was injured early. Ferguson, loved him out of Wisconsin. I was right about that. I knew he'd be better pro than he was at Wisconsin because he was held back by Graham Mertz and really bad quarterback play. And he's proven himself. He honestly has. He's been really productive as a receiver for 2 straight years, and he's a good blocker. He came from Wisconsin and that program. So I think right now it's fair to say for me, I'm going to put the Cowboys 3 and the Giants 2 just for now. But I think from an upside standpoint, if Theo can reach what I think Theo Johnson can reach in year 1, but that's debatable because he does have to, develop. Giants will be easily the second best team and maybe even the best team in this division, honestly, because I think he has that kind of upside. But for now, I'm going to say Ferguson's a little more proven than Bellinger than what we have there. Though that's close for me because I like Bellinger's blocking. And then, I'm still kind of waiting to see it first with Theo Johnson.
And that's fair. Look, I had the Eagles number 1, the Giants 2, Cowboys 3, Commanders 4 as how I how it ended up for me. I just think Daniel Bellinger is an underrated player. I think he's an above average blocker. I think there's some meat on the bone as a receiver. And then Theo Johnson, we just haven't seen it yet, but I think Theo Johnson is also somebody with a ton of potential who can step in here and be an impact player as a receiver and as a blocker. And then you go to Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll. One of those guys might not even make the team, depending on what Darren Waller does. And I think both of those guys are better than the third tight end that the Giants had last season. So I just appreciate the depth that the Giants have and the potential that the Giants have with all of these young tight ends. And again, if Darren Waller was included in this, I would have had the Giants number 1 because of all that depth. And Darren Waller, I would still say, Darren Waller, is he better than Dallas Goedert? I think it's hard to kind of say that. Like, I think if they're both healthy, yeah. But can we really ascribe that to Darren Waller at this point in his career with all the injuries he's had over the last 3 seasons?
Yeah, it's just interesting. It's really bad luck on the Waller front. I feel like when Shane traded for him, he had some little bit of injuries, but I know he had some injuries, but it wasn't like he was just a dud, a dead spot at that point of his career. And he still had so much flash to him. Even the film we broke down of his last season with the Raiders, where he was injured some of that season, when he came back, he was unbelievable. So just it kind of feels like really bad luck on that front. And there's obviously, mental stuff going on with him and his will and desire to play, things like that. So if fully healthy, yeah, but again, it's hard to say at this point if he's fully healthy and fully engaged. That's the other part of that. So I think it's fair. And at this point, we don't know what's going on with Waller, but I think we have to lean toward him retiring at this point and not being a part of the Giants in 2023 until proven otherwise. All right, let's move on to the last position group here. Offensive line. Where are we at there?
Yeah, it's another Eagles. It's an Eagles sweep. And I wish I kind of went through
Eagles
interior.
Sweep. That's crazy to think about.
I know. And if I did go through the interior offensive line with the center position specifically, I would have finally been able to rank the Eagles probably last in the division, maybe third in the division because Jason Kelce, he retired. But look, you just got to call it what it is. They have Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, 2 of the top tackles in the league. They have Landon Dickerson, who's one of the better guards in the league. Now, no more Jason Kelce. That certainly hurts, but they had Cam Jurgens, who they selected, who can fill that void at this point. So they've crossed their T's. They've dotted their I's. They've drafted 4th-round rookies and 3rd-round rookies, like kid that they got, Tyler Steen, I think his name was, out of Alabama, who can come in and fill in, possibly play guard, be a swing tackle. They just have depth there. And if you just look at all 4 of these offensive lines, I have the Cowboys with 3 points at second, Giants with 2 points at third, and then the Commanders in a pretty distant last place spot at this point. I had to go with the Eagles, and it's gross. I know, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is where it really gets interesting. We're doing it, and we'll close out here by breaking down the offensive lines. But the Eagles and Cowboys, I think are clearly ahead of the Giants and Commanders in this division on the offensive line. I think we're talking about a tier or tier two or two-tier drop from an overall offensive line standpoint. Whether you want to give the Cowboys or the Eagles the one is a debate, but I think the Eagles certainly deserve it with those two tackles and with Landon Dickerson and just everything they have there. But the Cowboys have invested as well, man. Tyler Smith was an amazing draft pick by them. He was taken, 20 picks after, or 15 picks after Evan Neal, 14, 15 picks after Evan Neal. And he's just a much better player than Evan Neal. And it's hard for me to imagine, even though we both had much higher, not much, but higher grades on Evan Neal than Smith at the time. And we're only 2 years out. It's at this point sad to admit, but it's hard to imagine Evan Neal is going to be a better player than Tyler Smith or have any real chance to be a better player. And that's just, by 2 years in, kind of to an extent, if that can be possible. Zach Martin's still one of the best players in the NFL at his position. Steele is just somebody who they found and he played well for them. And now they re-up. They got Tyler Guyton. And Tyler Guyton was one of the most athletic prospects ever. And he moves really well. And I'm sure with the development that they've had over the years in the offensive line, they'll figure out a way to make him really good as well. So it's hard for me to imagine the Giants are on that level yet, or even in that tier. So I think this is fair, 1-2. I definitely have the Giants over the Commanders. I think the Commanders' offensive line could be an absolute disaster that no one's discussing right now. Yeah, they have drafted third-round pick Brandon Coleman, but I've watched some Brandon Coleman, and I am not certain he's going to be ready to play at the NFL level right away. And it's him or Cornelius Lucas at left tackle. That is not pretty for a rookie quarterback. And I even think, look, they made a mistake with Nick Gates. I think that's obvious. They signed Nick Gates. We love him. He was a Giants guy. He worked well for us, but he's not a starting center in the NFL. And I think that was so clear if you just watched Dexter Lawrence versus him last year. But now they kind of went back to the well, and they did another one of these with the division ad with Tyler Biadasz. Look, he's Wisconsin Badger, but Biadasz was not good for the Cowboys when he played there.
He's better than Nick Gates, though.
He's better than Gates, for sure. Yeah. Because Gates, no offense, is just not really an NFL caliber starter. But I don't really trust Tyler Biadasz without Zach Martin next to him. And we're going to see that play out this year with the Commanders. So I think the Giants are, I would say it's like tier one, Eagles, then Cowboys, but Eagles ahead of Cowboys. Drop tier. Drop maybe even another tier, but let's say no. Tier 3 Giants, and then I might drop a tier to get to tier 5 to show the difference between Giants and Commanders. I do not like this Commanders offensive line. They don't have an Andrew Thomas at all anywhere on the offensive line. And I will take like the JMSs and the Runyons and the people we've added over a lot of what they have there. Like I look across their offensive line, I'm not excited.
So we have a little bit of time here. So let's play this out. How much further, in your opinion, are the Cowboys over the Giants if the Giants can reach 80% of their potential, which
then
is realistic?
Commanders, are you saying?
No. I'm talking about the Cowboys. So what's the gap between the Cowboys and the Giants? If Carmen Brasillo can unlock something we haven't seen from JMS and Evan Neal?
Good question. I don't think it's that far. Like I said, the teardrop, that's just for now because I'm back factoring in the downside too, which is every year we go back to this well saying the offensive line coach is going to help us. But I think that they're trending somewhat down on the offensive line, the Cowboys. Zach Martin's not going to be able to play forever, right? He's already really old. And, they've hit on Tyler Smith, but we have Andrew Thomas, and he's young. So now it's Tyler Guyton versus the JMS types, and we've got John Runyon here versus what they've got going with the Terrence Steele. So I think it's actually pretty damn close if Brasillo can get them to play better.
I'm right there with you, man. If Brasillo can unlock anything from Evan Neal, right? And Brasillo had some interesting comments last week too, just about not judging the development of these young players when they're playing injured. It suggests to me that Evan Neal was probably playing really injured these past couple seasons, right? And I'm hoping that's the case, man. That's the optimist in me, that this dude was just gutting it out, playing through injuries. He made comments about flipping burgers because he's pissed off because he is not getting any credit for playing through injuries. He's just getting, people chastising him like crazy because he sucks. And he's like, I'm playing through this. That's what I'm hoping for. And maybe I'm not optimistic, to be honest, but that's what I'm at least hoping for. And I am hopeful that Carmen Brasillo will be able to unlock something different in him just because it's a different voice in his ear from Bobby Johnson. Although we've heard that Bobby Johnson was really well respected in the locker room too. So maybe that wasn't as big of an issue as a lot of the Giants fans and maybe us made it out to be. But I do think the talent gap between the two is much closer. What about the Eagles though? Now that's where it gets really crazy because who's the best tackle in the division? Like it might be Lane Johnson over Andrew Thomas.
Sure.
And then and then Jordan Mailata's in that comment. Like it's a top. It's
and then Landon Dickerson's by far the best guard in the division.
Yeah.
I think Juergens might hit for them just knowing their development. So I don't think Giants are even close to that level of offensive line. And they don't have Stoutland, the best offensive line coach probably still going in the NFL. with all that talent. So I don't think the Giants are going to get there anytime soon. It's not like they drafted another first-round talent on the offensive line this year or even a second-round talent. We can't be looking toward that. That's. I mean, God, would it be good to be a fan of a team that had that kind of offensive line and that offensive line coach? You just know you win football games when you have that. But I'm not looking for that just yet, Nick. I don't think we're getting there anytime soon. But I do feel way more confident about the Giants offensive line than I do like the Commanders. So I don't think the Giants, like, despite having the worst O-line last year, I think so much of that was circumstance, injuries.
I agree with you, man. I agree with you. So to quickly recap, let's add up all the points. The Eagles swept, so they had 20 points. Cowboys had 12. Giants had 10. And the Commanders had 8 in this incredibly detailed analysis of the NFC East. Dan, any final thoughts?
No, I think we're pretty close. I gave the Giants 1 fewer point on one of the positions than 1 point up on running back, so it's pretty even with where you see it. So, it is what it is. The Giants have work to do. We know that. The Giants haven't been winning a lot. It's not like we're just going to come out here and homer you out and be like, yeah, the Giants are the best in the division. They're just a little behind the Eagles, maybe a point or two. No, we know where we're at, and there's work to do, and he's building, and Joe Shane and Brian Dable are building at their pace.
But I'll say this, man, there are pieces in place at least. Like, there have been times where we've entered seasons we were like, yo, we suck. There are at least pieces in place that we can look at and gain some sort of optimism for the future.
This roster doesn't look that bad to me, honestly. Outside of one, not potentially having a quarterback, this roster doesn't look that bad to me.
That's the main thing is you need to, if there's the main ingredient to the recipe for a successful NFL team is the quarterback position. And that's a huge question mark. It's the biggest question mark with the New York Giants right now. And there's a lot of money tied up into the position too.
But there are people who will argue that, the rest of it, a good roster can hide the quarterback and, disguise it in some ways. And that's what the Giants are going to be hoping for in 2023. 2024. All right. That's it for the Big Blue Banter today. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.